What you have to do to talk with your computer. It'll be up and ready to run. Yes. It's warming up. It's coming.
Oh, it's coming out?
It's coming up. I can see the bulk of them on anyway. I don't see the display yet.
Oh, it's coming. Here it comes. What's this
Let's
word?
try and what to report. Okay.
Hello. Front row seat. Holy shit.
Wow, man. He volunteered. Good. He gave up your real seat. All right, let's get started. I want to thank everybody for showing up. In fact, I'll steal the microphone. Yeah, 1, 2.
There we go. Yay.
Chair down front here. There, let's see. We got 2 chairs up here. I think this is the biggest attendance we've had. So I want to thank everybody for showing up for the quarterly ARES meeting for District 10 and our spotter training. We've started this. How many times have we done this, Mike? This is our third training for ARES. We do it typically this time of year, just before severe weather season gets started, or in this case, just after. We're going to go through our spotter training. I'm going to have Mike introduce Chad and talk a little bit about the program. Mike has some interesting things to address both safety and procedures after spotter training. Then we'll get into the ARES part of the meeting, and people are welcome to stay for as much as they're willing to put up with. We're going to talk a little bit about, from an ARES standpoint, what we've been up to recently from an emergency and simulated emergency standpoint. We're going to talk about the ATV video project that we have going with the Loveland EOC in the Northeastern Emergency Responders region. And we'll talk a little bit about things like the renewals. If you look at your badge, you'll see it expires in July, so we'll talk about that a little bit. And a few other things. So I don't expect the ARES portion of the meeting to be more than maybe 45 minutes. I think Tom was going to talk a little bit about event response safety and a couple of things that we've run up against in the last 12 months. But all in all, it should go pretty quick. We didn't even plan for lunch. It goes over. I'm sure we can do something on the fly. But we're going to try to get you back out in the blue sky before it turns nasty today. So anyway, with that, I'll turn it over to Mike.
Thank you, bro. Thank you. Everybody, welcome. ARES, Amateur Radio Emergency Services.
Get a ARES count, hands and ham radio operators.
Okay. So, number one, raise your hand if you're an amateur radio operator. Okay, cool. If you're an ARES D10 member. Okay. And if you're not a D10 member but belong to ARES somewhere else. Okay. Now, amateur radio is not required for this. Spotting can be done from your home, from your car. Now, that's not necessarily safe from your car without communications, so just be aware of that. This training is really important to me. A lot of people know that I survived the Windsor tornado, head-on impact there. So one of the missions that I've taken on to kind of get back to the community is coordinate Skywarn here in northern Colorado. I also spot and I chase. I'll chase outside of the state every so often as well. But we're not Reed Timmers, we're not Discovery Channel. Our concern is spotting tornadoes, severe weather, lightning, floods, damage from severe weather, and ensuring that that information gets to NWS, National Weather Service, and also to emergency services groups as well. So, you know, we've got a large mission. And we need a lot of spotters. And our number one concern after spotting, or actually before spotting in a lot of cases, is safety. You'll see a lot of video from the Alabama tornadoes. I recommend do not do what those people were doing. All right, they got way too close. So our goal is to be at least a mile or more away. And the more possible, the better. All right. So one of the things I do that Scott here has volunteered for to help me with is I kind of listen to the radio a lot as we're out running around spotting tornadoes. We have net control people who manage the communications, coordinate the communications with NWS and 911. And last year we had a guy that got a little excited, okay, and it happens. tornadoes are cool, your adrenaline gets going, your heart's pumping, and the first time you see one, it's phenomenal. The second time you see one, it's phenomenal, okay? I've never gotten tired of seeing them. A little post-traumatic once in a while, but they're great. This is May 25th, last year. A group of us had just seen a funnel cloud over Milliken. Everybody knows where Milliken is at. We'd just seen a funnel cloud. We'd also heard that Vortex 2 was in the area. So we had so many people on the road. It was just about 4:30. Traffic everywhere, all right? So it was very crazy. So I'm going to play the role of net control. And Scott here, he's going to play the role of Sierra, who just happens to be a spotter. Down here in Conflicted. And we planned this out really well. And we use phonetics all the time for call signs, and I just called him Sierra, that's his call, and I'm the net control, so you can imagine that you're on the phone and I might be somebody in NWS, all right? So just think about that, and so we're going to get started here, so go ahead.
What? Oh, that's where I'm starting.
No, right here.
Oh.
You just called Sierra.
Sierra.
Go ahead, Sierra. Can you read that?
This one?
Yeah.
It says, this is...
Got to say it high voice. Get your feminine side.
This is KD0. 4835.
Yeah.
Wow. I am 4 miles east of Brighton on 120th. Tornado.
Okay. So now imagine, if you will, high squeaky voice saying this so fast that the guy on the other end cannot understand what you're saying. Okay. So next time around, okay, try for that.
Pick it up a little here.
Yeah, we're going to try to put some emotion into it. Okay, Sierra, I did not copy your report.
This is KD0 4835. I'm 4 miles east of Brighton on the 120th. A tornado.
All stations stand by. Sierra, where are you?
This is KD0 4835. I'm 4 miles east of Brighton on 120th. A tornado.
And at this point, somebody else broke in and said, break.
So we're back here.
Yeah, we're back.
I'm 4 miles east of Brighton on 120th. A tornado. It's on the ground.
Go ahead, break. And then the guy starts talking, so I'll play him a little bit. But at the same time, this other guy, Sierra, starts talking also. So you can hear two people trying to talk on the radio at the same time. Not very easy. So go ahead. So this is...
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead, break.
You're right there.
KD0?
You're this guy right
Oh. I'm not sure where you're at. This is KD0 4835.
there. This is KZ0.
I am 4 miles
I am
east of
100 yards
Brighton,
west of
120th.
Sierra. This
A
is
tornado,
not a tornado,
a
just a scud cloud on the ground. And then finally, I say, Sierra, ma'am, please stand by. Ma'am.
Okay. I'm not Obama. I'm a sir.
So, anyway, what I'm trying to get across is that this guy was so excited. His voice was 20 octaves over. He's trying to communicate with what's going on. He had no clue what was happening around him. And there were people 100 yards away. They're watching the same cloud, talking to us as well, talking to NWS, getting conflicting reports. So the idea here is that every once in a while, you've got to step back, take an observation, really look at what you're watching, and then make your report and try to calm down. Because I will tell you, you will be excited, okay? So, and I'd like to introduce Chad, who's from the National Weather Service. He's one of our counterparts that we work with. So if we're up on the radio during the day, during severe weather, he may be on the other end. We may have other NWS folks. I don't know exactly what you do down there. I know Bob Glancy, who is one of the coordinators, coordinates the spotter training and severe weather. So I'll let Chad take and talk about what he does, and we'll go from there.
All right, thanks, Mike. First, I want to say thanks for taking your time. It's turning out to be a beautiful morning. Thank you for sacrificing that to come and be here. And appreciate the fact that you're willing to help out your community by doing the things that you do. Sometimes we spend a lot of time preparing and doing little things and wonder if it makes a difference. But trust me, the time does come when what you guys are preparing for will make a difference. So thank you for investing your time into this. I'm one of the forecasters at the Weather Service, so I'm the guy who's sitting in front of the computer every day looking at the weather and, making the guess for tomorrow. And also, we're the ones who put out the warnings. So I will sometimes, I do have an amateur radio license. I will sometimes jump on the radio down there. The way we work is we try to have a volunteer come in to work that position because really what I need to be doing in severe weather situations is watching the radar and putting out warnings and making sure we're not missing anything. So our goal is to have a volunteer in there on a busy severe weather day to free us up to do what we do the best. But sometimes it's a quiet day where we get a little surprised and we have a few storms, or sometimes when we're not able to get a volunteer in quick enough, sometimes we will jump on there as well. All right, so let me ask how many of you have had National Weather Service spotter training before? Okay, looks like maybe 2/3 of you, something like that. I'm going to go fairly quickly then so that we can try to have a little more time for the advanced part of it, but we'll try to stop every once in a while and take a question or two to make sure we don't lose anybody. And I think I can do this by carrying, we have a fancy clicker, but I get to carry the mouse around, which feels kind of weird, but I think it works. The National Weather Service is part of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. I'd like to share some of our government acronyms with you, as if you don't have enough. Of course, I work for the National Weather Service. Our office is down in Boulder. We serve the area from Rabbit Ears Pass and Vail Pass out to the northeast corner of Colorado. We've got about 120 offices around the country that each serve a similar size area. So we try to be small enough so that we can have local knowledge and be able to get out and do outreach, things like this. We try not to have you calling somebody in Kansas City or Washington, D.C. that doesn't know where Milliken is. And the nice thing is we have a small enough area where we can get to know the local weather patterns and hopefully get to know some of you as well and have a little bit of a relationship and not just be some stranger sitting in an office somewhere. So why do we do spotter training? What's so complicated about this? We're going to focus a lot about understanding what you look at when you look at the sky. Okay, Fritz here in the boat doesn't really know what he's in for. Okay, he can look up there and see the clouds, but they don't mean anything to him. So we're going to be trying to understand what we see when we look at the sky. We want to understand what a thunderstorm is, how it works, what are we looking at, what are the signs we can look at in the sky to understand what's happening in a thunderstorm, how to stay safe. I hear Mike's stressing safety a lot, and we like that. Our whole goal, it's a great thing in your life, if at some point you called in a spotter report that saved somebody's life or kept a few people from getting hurt. Okay, that's a good accomplishment, that's worthwhile. Okay, completely blows that away if you get yourself hurt in the process. Okay, you just undid everything you were working to do. So we don't want to do that. And how to make accurate reports. Tornado doesn't help us. We need more information than that and a better description of that. So we're going to talk about some of the ways we can communicate more effectively. All right, we live in a place where we've got a lot of weather. Unfortunately, we can see a lot of it too. We don't have a lot of those nasty trees that get in the way, and we don't have the haze, so we can see all kinds of things. Anybody see this storm? These are all things from last year. This was right up on the state line by the wind farm. And we had a big tornado that actually went across the state line up there. Here's a really pretty one out by Last Chance. This was kind of a surprise how high the Platte River got last year. Most of the water came out of the Poudre, actually. And we had some flooding on the northwest side of Greeley. We didn't have a huge snowpack last year, but we had a lot of snow in late April and early May, and it got hot. We wound up with the same result. I had a busy day on August 16th. And here's some of the damage from that day. And then one of our biggest events, which is actually not over yet, is the big fire we had west of Boulder in September, and it remains to be seen whether the bigger event is going to be the fire itself or the flooding that we're expecting to come eventually from the runoff from the burn area. Hopefully we won't have hundreds of homes destroyed, but there still is a significant threat to as far as flash flooding that could be life-threatening from this. And, you know, it's not enough to have one fire that close to your office in a year. We might as well have two. That one was almost in town. So here's the plan for my part of today. We're going to have a basic training that lasts a little over an hour. We'll take a short, maybe 10-minute break, bathroom or drinks or whatever, and then come right back and we'll have an advanced training session after that. If you sign our list and you attend the basic training, you are qualified to be an official spotter for the National Weather Service. The way the program works is in addition to using amateur radio as a communication, there's also an 800 number that you can call. So we're going to ask you to report in whenever you see certain criteria, half-inch or larger hail, damaging winds, funnel clouds, or tornadoes. So if you're a new spotter, you will receive some information. It may take a couple of weeks. Hopefully we can get it out before May 1st. That will have all the reporting criteria and procedures. Nothing too complicated, but we want you to be our eyes out in the field. Radar can tell us a lot, but it can't replace your eyes. In the basic training, we're going to talk about thunderstorms. What are they? What ingredients do we have? How do we make a good thunderstorm? What is the structure like? What to look for to understand what's happening? Different kinds of storms. We're going to talk about tornadoes. We're going to talk a lot about what is and isn't a tornado. Thunderstorm safety. And we'll talk about where can you get weather information. And we'll talk about some other cloud features that sometimes are mistaken for tornadoes and things that can help you understand what's going on. And we've got a little, I don't like to call it a quiz, I like to call it a game at the end. Some people don't like quizzes. So yeah, we have weather in Colorado every year. 500,000 cloud-to-ground lightning strikes. So we got, what, about 5 million Coloradans? So for every 10 Coloradans, we've got a lightning bolt. We got, what, 70 people in here? So keep that in mind. We had 80 tornado warnings last year, and we wound up with 71 tornadoes, so it's not a bad ratio. 152 severe thunderstorm warnings in 2010. Last year was actually kind of a quiet severe weather year for us. It was not as busy as the average year. All right, tornadoes is the most complicated thing we're going to talk about. So let's get started on what is and isn't a tornado. Definition is pretty simple. Okay, we've got a rotating column of air which extends all the way from the ground up to a convective cloud. Okay, so there's a connection between what's happening in the cloud and what's happening on the ground. It's usually found in the updraft part of the storm, and the feature to look for there is a rain-free cloud base. A funnel cloud is a rotating cloud that hangs down out of the cloud, but it has not come in contact with the ground yet. It's not a tornado, not yet. We want to hear about those, but we need it to be reported as a funnel cloud. There's the thing called a gustnado, which is the opposite of a funnel cloud. It's a swirl at the ground that doesn't extend all the way up to the cloud base. It might be on the side of an area where there's strong winds, and you get swirls on the edge of an area of wind. But if it's not connected to the cloud, it doesn't pose that much of a threat because it's that deep connection with the cloud and with the updraft of the storm that's going to cause it to intensify to the point where it can cause damage. Most gustnados don't have that strong of a wind speed. They can look pretty neat, but it's not a tornado unless it gets connected to the cloud base, and they usually don't. Okay, here are some two options for what a tornado can look like. The one on the left, I would say, is a more typical Colorado tornado. It's not completely visible. The one on the right is more classic. These are both Colorado tornadoes. The one on the left was in a drier environment. And what you see with the tornado is the water vapor that's condensed because the pressure is lower. And so that lower pressure makes a cloud in the tornado circulation. And so if we're in a fairly dry environment, you can have that rotating column of air without seeing that condensation all the way up. And a lot of times they'll start like that one on the left, and then they'll get more and more visible, and they may, if they continue to intensify, get larger and and more visible. The one on the right is a fairly moist environment. You can see how the cloud base is lower. It's a lot easier to make that really visible cloud. The other thing that you're going to see is dust, and sometimes you'll get a good swirl of dust that's being lifted up as well. But be aware that you can have a tornado that where you can only see portions of it because it's a dry environment. Anybody remember that day, Mike? Okay. That looks a little more, if you saw the pictures from Alabama the other day, wide tornado, low cloud base. We don't see that here very often. Typically we have high cloud bases and narrow tornadoes, and it looks like a straw. Here in this case it's more like, I don't know, just a cloud hanging down on the ground. And we don't usually see that. A lot of people in Windsor didn't really know what it was at first that they were seeing. It was a big dark cloud that looked scary, but until it got close enough that they could actually see things rotating around, a lot of people didn't understand what was happening because that's not what a typical Colorado tornado looks like. All right, how do we get a thunderstorm? We're gonna make a thunderstorm. We need three things. We need moisture, okay, preferably down low in the atmosphere. We need instability, and instability, we'll talk a little more about it, but if we lift air up from the ground, is it going to continue to rise, or is it going to stop going up? Some days the atmosphere is unstable, and that means once you start to displace air upward, it's going to continue to go up. And there are some days where the atmosphere is resistant to that, and we say the atmosphere is stable. So we want instability so that we can get deep up and down motions in the atmosphere. And we need a source of lift. We need something to start air moving upwards. Can anybody tell me which one of these three things we're usually short of around here?
Moisture.
Moisture is the correct answer. We usually have the other ingredients most days, but so moisture tends to be the main variable in Colorado. All right, how do you get lift? Any kind of a cold front is a great source of lift. But some things that we have every day around here: upslope winds, jet streams. A lot of times we joke in the summer there's probably an invisible little ripple in the jet stream, and we'll know where it is when the thunderstorms develop. So that makes it kind of hard to forecast because you can have something that you really can't detect until it produces the thunderstorm, and then oh, there it is, you know. But and heating differences, water versus land, or our version of the water versus land. In Florida, they have a lot of thunderstorms on the sea breezes that come in and out from the coastline every day. Around here, sometimes you can see this in irrigated land versus not irrigated land. It's a lesser effect, but it is there some days. Most commonly, though, we have the upslope winds. Even on a day when the wind is calm, just the variation in slope and elevation will produce upslope winds during the daytime, and so we tend to get thunderstorms over the higher terrain as a preferred starting place because of the upslope winds. All right, let's talk about instability. As the day heats up, the comparison I like to use is your boiling water to make spaghetti. Okay? And where are you heating the pot? It's getting heated from the bottom. Okay? And what that does is it starts warming up the air, the water at the bottom of the pot, and that warm air, or that warm water will rise in the pot. And once it gets going, once it gets hot enough, then it's going to be circulating through that pot, and you'll start to get bubbles on the top. Well, the same thing happens in the atmosphere. The sun shines, heats up the ground, and the air heats from the warm ground, and the warm ground is actually the source of the heat for the atmosphere. And so we're starting to form little bubbles. And as the day goes on, we get bigger and bigger bubbles. And here in Colorado, most of our thunderstorms wind up being primarily driven by that sunshine and the energy that the sun is putting into the ground. That's why most of our thunderstorms here are in the afternoon and early evening hours, is because we're needing that heat of the day to start the air parcels rising. So we tend to have cold air. In a typical atmosphere, we have cold air aloft, we have warmer air at the ground. Typically it's warmer in Fort Collins than it is up on top of the mountains, at the Cameron Pass, say. But that difference is exacerbated during the daytime when the ground warms up, and then at night the surface cools off again, and so we don't have the instability anymore. So typically things will settle down within a couple hours after sunset. Here's the difference between the 2 days. A day when the atmosphere is wanting to allow that vertical motion and a day where it's suppressing it. In the picture on the left, this is a plume from a forest fire, so the source of heat there is the fire. But once that air is warmed up, that plume is going way up in the atmosphere. It looks like several miles up into the atmosphere, and it looks like it's coming pretty quickly. It's very, very bubbly. I mean, think of the pot. It's like the bubbles when your pot is boiling pretty well. So that's a day with an unstable atmosphere. That would be a typical summer afternoon here. Picture on the right is a very stable atmosphere. We tend to have that the most on a winter morning. You had a long night, the ground cooled off, and so you have cold air at the surface that winds up getting quite a bit colder than the air off the ground. And so in this case, your heat source here is some kind of man-made exhaust, maybe a power plant or a factory, something like that. And it warms up the air enough so that it can rise a couple of thousand feet, but then it stops. And what happens is the air coming out of that exhaust vent is warmer than the air around it, so it rises. But as it goes up, it gets to a point where it's no longer warmer than the air around it. It looks around and says, hey, this is where I fit in. There's no reason for me to keep rising. And so it just stays at that level. In the picture on the left, the atmosphere keeps getting colder as it goes up. And so that as the air rises, the atmosphere is still colder than the air in that smoke plume. And so it can go a long ways before it reaches that level at which it fits in. All right, so we've got the instability, we've got the moisture, we've got a source of lift. Here's what happens. Here's how your thunderstorm lives and dies. You start out with your little bubble of air at the bottom over here on the left side, and you get a little cumulus cloud, and this is your little bubble starting. And then as that rises, water vapor starts to condense in the cloud, and it forms raindrops or snowflakes. We like to talk about water, but actually in most of our thunderstorms, most of the water is in the form of snow because it's above the freezing level. Typically, freezing level is 14,000, 15,000 feet elevation, so most of your cloud is usually above that. So sometime in a thunderstorm, you can tell your friend, there's a raging blizzard going on about 2 miles away from here. You just go up 2 miles, there's a raging blizzard going on. And it's just warm enough to melt before it gets to the ground. So in the mature stage, eventually you get to a point where there's enough mass that it starts to fall out. The snow starts to fall out. You wind up with rain at the ground. Maybe in the right conditions you've got hail. And so in the mature stage, you've got this updraft, which is your bubble of warm air rising, but now you've also got the precipitation falling down. And that will be cold air because of the evaporation as the snow is changing into rain and evaporating as it falls down. So you wind up with kind of a warm updraft side and a cold downdraft side. And eventually your energy that was causing this warm bubble is exhausted, and you wind up with the dissipating stage where all you've got is this rain falling out, and the updraft is no longer. So there is your basic life cycle. In the simplest thunderstorm, this will take place on the order of 30 minutes to an hour. If the thunderstorm gets organized, if there's something to make it have that updraft persist, then this can last a lot longer, or you can have a succession of these in an organized fashion. All right, so what are we going to see when we go out to look at a thunderstorm? Okay, it's going to depend on several things. Okay, how far away are we? If we're a long ways away, we'll get to see the top of it. We're not going to be able to see much at the bottom. We're not going to see a lot of detail, just because it's a long ways away. What side of the storm you're on? Okay, the front is going to look different from the back, which is going to look different from the side. Visibility. If you're in Rhode Island in the summer, okay, on a good day you can see 5 miles. So you're not going to see much. Okay, you're going to see whatever's right up here. In Colorado, on the other hand, you might be looking at something that looks really interesting that's 70 miles away. It's going to depend on where you are. If you're in the middle of Fort Collins, you're going to have buildings and trees in the way, so you're not going to have a good view of the horizon. You'll have a good view of what's above you. If you find a high place to look, you're going to see a lot more. Your primary goal is to look for that updraft. And we'll talk more about why, but we want to be looking for, is it a strong updraft? And then is there rotation associated with the updraft, which would lead to a tornado threat? So the strong updraft we need to produce organized high winds, to produce hail. That's going to require a strong updraft. The rotation part is all about whether we could get a tornado or not. All right, so let's look at these things. We're going to start about 40 miles away from the storm. Stuff's going up out in Weld County, and we're looking east at it. How can we tell the intensity of this? Okay, we're mainly looking at the top of the storm because we're so far away, we can't see the bottom of it. Everything down at the bottom is going to be fuzzy because you're looking through all the dust and water vapor in the bottom of the atmosphere to see the bottom of the storm anyway. But there are some signs from a distance. Remember the analogy of the water boiling in the pot. When it really gets going, what does the top of the water surface look like? Okay, it's not level anymore. Okay, that level is sort of the equilibrium level where the water should stop. But if you get it really hot, then when the bubbles of hot water come up, they're going to go past that equilibrium level. And they'll rise up for a certain distance, and then they'll say, wait a minute, I'm not in the water anymore, and they'll fall back down. And so if your pot of water is really boiling, you get these bubbles on top of it that are above where the surface of the water should be. Well, the anvil in a thunderstorm is exactly like that. You'll see this flat top right here. And that's your equilibrium level. That's the point at which the rising warm air parcels get to be the same temperature as the atmosphere. But if you have strong updrafts, you'll have bubbles on top where it's overshooting. Those are called an overshooting top. And that's an indication that your updraft is strong enough that it's bubbling up, the water's bubbling up out of the pot. And it's exactly the same thing. When it gets to the equilibrium level, it's still hot. It's still a few degrees warmer, and it overshoots for a little while, and then it comes back down. Sign of a strong updraft. Here's a storm that we're a long ways away from, but you can see it's got a very strong updraft because it's not just a little overshooting top, but it's kind of exploding out in every direction. And it's also just very large. You can just see the size of that thing. You can tell it's a long ways away, but it's still a huge angle, so that's just a very large, strong storm. Compare it with that. Okay. This isn't quite as far away. But look at the. Let me go back to the other one. I want you to just look at the intensity, how well defined the cloud is in that picture. Is there a pretty clear difference between the inside and the outside of that cloud? Okay. The air parcels here are pretty much doing the same thing. They got hot and they're rising, and they get to their equilibrium level and they spread out. But in this case, they're really lazy. In this picture, they're doing it in a big hurry and strongly. And in this picture, they're just kind of drifting up there and gradually spreading out. You see how fuzzy it is, how wispy. You can almost kind of see through parts of it. So the same thing's happening there, but much, much more slowly. You might have a 10-mile-an-hour updraft in this storm, where in the other one you might have had a 50-mile-an-hour updraft. Okay, let's get a little closer to the storm here. We're going to get maybe 15 miles away. We're going to be able to see a little farther down at the bottom, maybe not see the bottom of it that well. But we're going to look at the updraft, the main tower of the storm. And we're going to look for something called the flanking line. It's a sign of organization. All right, which one of these looks like a strong storm? Gave it away with the caption there. The one on the left is kind of fuzzy. That wasn't well timed, sorry. It's doing its thing. It's going up, but if you look at the edge, you can see how it's kind of turbulent on the edge. It looks like the air outside the storm is kind of mixing with the inside, and it's fuzzy. And the one on the right, looks like it could be from a volcanic eruption or a nuclear bomb or something like that. It's this big, solid tower with a sharp edge to it, right here. See how solid that edge looks? I mean, it looks like if a plane flew into it, it might bounce off or something. That's a sign that there's a strong updraft. It's not mixing with the outside air very much. It's just this solid column of air that's going straight up. Right, here's the flanking line. You've got the main updraft cell in the middle there, pretty solid updraft. But then back behind it, you see those smaller towers that are just starting? And this is organized enough that you're having a series of updrafts one after another. And there's actually been one earlier over here that's now in the downdraft stage. So that was the last one. You have the active one that has a strong updraft going on right now. But there's something, and it's usually a wind shift line where the winds are coming together along a line. And so this is going to be the next one, and another one, and another one. And so in this thunderstorm complex, you're actually going to have a series of updrafts one after another, which means that even though the individual updrafts go through that cycle of going up, and then having the updraft and the downdraft, and then finally just the downdraft, each individual updraft will go through that cycle. The thunderstorm itself is going to continue longer than that because it's organized enough to have a series of updrafts one after another. This thing we have a lot in eastern Colorado. This is kind of our typical Colorado thunderstorm, but maybe not for right along the foothills, but out on the plains. Typically, the storms will at least get organized like this, where you have a series of these updrafts along the line. All right, now we're getting closer. We're more than 1 mile away from the storm, right? Not in the mesocyclone, not in the hail shaft. I look over at Mike. It probably came to you, right? Yeah. And it was going fast the wrong way. So we're looking at different motions now. We're close enough to actually see what's going on underneath the storm. So we're looking at the downdraft coming out of the storm with the precipitation, where the outflow winds from that are going. We're also looking at the air coming into the storm. You're looking under the updraft. Where is the updraft? How's the air coming into it? Is there any rotation going on under there? Focus mostly on that rain-free cloud base. Where is the updraft the strongest? Is there rotation in that area? Are there lowerings that indicate that the updraft is getting focused in one spot? Because what happens is when we're developing a tornado, to get a tornado, if you wanted to make one, you've got to concentrate that updraft into a small space. You're concentrating both the updraft and the rotation into a smaller and smaller space, and that's how you can get the extreme wind velocity to make a tornado. You might start with a 10-mile-an-hour updraft and maybe a 20-mile-an-hour rotation. And to concentrate that, it's like a figure skater pulling her arms in. And what happens is that same energy that was spread out is now getting focused into a smaller space, but you need the same amount of energy, so the speed increases. And so if the skater reduces her diameter by half, her speed gets doubled. Same thing happens with a thunderstorm updraft. So to get a tornado, you need to concentrate that into a smaller and smaller space. All right, so here's what we're looking at. First, we're looking at the downdraft. All this fuzzy area back here is rain or hail, and the air is coming down out of the thunderstorm over there and spreading out. This funny shaped thing in the front is the updraft. You can see the cloud base is lowered there. When that updraft gets concentrated, the pressure gets reduced, and so you have a lower cloud base because the air is saturating in that lower pressure more easily, so it doesn't have to get lifted as far. So the things you see hanging down out of clouds, the wall clouds, the funnel clouds, is an area of lower pressure. In this case, it's also pretty round, so we can be pretty sure that that's rotating. The roundness is a good indication of rotation. So the downdraft, a lot of times, is on the front part of the storm because the winds aloft push the rain out ahead of where the storm is. It's where it's dark, where the rain is, downward motion, and the thread in there is hail or damaging winds from the downdraft air spreading out. A lot of times, especially in Colorado, because we're so dry here, there's evaporation that cools it off a lot, and that can lead to pressure gradients that produce strong winds. All right, we got a quiz for you here. I want you to see if the wind is flowing out of the storm or into the storm here. I think the storm's on our left here, so things are blowing in. That's inflow. Okay, that is going fast. What they're trying to show you here is a shelf cloud, but it's pretty dark. We need to fix the contrast on that. At the front edge of the outflow, there's oftentimes a low cloud that looks pretty ominous. All right, there's inflow. Okay, pretty strong inflow into that storm, and you've got a lowering in the updraft. So the air is going into that and then up. And watch the dust here. Inflow or outflow? I think it was headed in. Looking at the grass is a good thing if you can, it's kind of hard to see in there, but yeah, there's some dust. That dust was headed out with the precipitation. Okay, what do we have here? Which way is the dust moving? Okay, that's inflow. The downdraft is back behind there, but in the front part of the storm here, from where we're looking, is the updraft. More dust, inflow or outflow? Okay, and that will translate into a strong updraft because all that has to go somewhere. In fact, you can see it. You can see where it's going. Okay, just getting sucked right up into that spot. Not a tornado, but you've got a strong, organized updraft that's kind of concentrated in one spot. So that's pretty interesting. All right, now we're going to talk about the outflow part, and it's something we have a lot of here. In fact, microbursts. I believe microbursts have killed more people in Colorado than tornadoes, certainly in the last 50 years. Straight line winds resulting from a downburst. You can have very strong wind speeds. I was at our office when we were down at Stapleton Airport in Denver, when we set the wind speed record for Denver, in the 85-mile-an-hour wind gust one afternoon, and it was kind of a quiet day, starting to cloud up a little bit, and all of a sudden our back door slams and the window breaks. And then there's a rumble of thunder. And it was a little area about 2 miles long, maybe half a mile to a mile wide, that had this microburst that was 80 to 90-mile-an-hour winds. All the little trees were snapped off. And there was, not major damage in that case, but there was a fair amount of minor damage from it. You can't get 100-mile-an-hour winds out of it. And it's that evaporation as the rain falls that drives it. Here's an example in a fairly moist environment where you've got a lot of precipitation. But you guys see this little foot sticking out? Imagine that's a leg coming down and the toes sticking out there. That's a sign of the acceleration. The acceleration of the wind here is pushing the precipitation particles out to the side there. So you have pretty strong winds in that area. So here's a schematic of how that works. You've got an area, maybe you had an updraft that was holding rain up in the air and the updraft has weakened. Maybe it weakened suddenly. And so all of a sudden all this mass is descending all at once. And it hits the ground and spreads out with that little foot. In this case it's symmetrical, so you've got that little curl on both sides. More often it tends to go in sort of a preferred direction. And so for a few minutes in a small area you've got an area of these strong winds on the ground. Here's what it tends to look like in Colorado. If you look closely, and a lot of times this is when you can have this out of even weak convection, sometimes not even thunder. We had somebody killed on an oil well in southern Weld County in a situation like this where I don't think there ever was thunder. But it was a really dry environment. There was enough rain coming out of this cloud that evaporated to make a pocket of cold air, and it knocked the drilling rig he was on over. So you've got this descending cold air that spreads out. So a lot of times you'll see a ring or an arc shape of dust as that wind spreads out. Again, typically it lasts a few minutes, covers a mile or two. Okay. Here's some outflow in a more moist environment. Your downdraft's over here. And your inflow is coming in from the left side of the picture. So there's your downdraft. Your outflow is coming out and meeting that inflow. And that inflow is lifted up over the outflow. And that funny shaped little interesting feature is called a shelf cloud. That can get mistaken for a funnel cloud pretty easily. Here's the key distinction. The shelf cloud is going to point away from the rain. Okay? And what's happening is this is being formed by this interface between the moist air and the dry air getting lifted. And so you've got some moisture in there and you've got the lift, and so you're forming that cloud. The area you're going to want to watch for a funnel cloud developing is going to be in here in this updraft area. So the hard thing about this is it's sort of in the right place. It's in the updraft, it's close to the rain. But if it's tilted away from the rain, it means it's got that wedge of cold outflow air underneath it. And so it's not, the cloud isn't there because you have accentuated lift, the cloud is there because of the moisture from the outflow. So when you see something like that, put it in the back of your head, you need to, if it's pointed away from the rain, it's probably not an immediate concern. Your wall clouds are going to tend to be either flat or pointed and maybe lowering a little bit toward the rain. Something else that probably looks even a little bit scarier is a roll cloud. It's sort of the same thing going on. You can see the precipitation is getting bent out in the outflow as it hits the ground and spreads out. Again, running into the inflow that's getting lifted over it. In this case, it's set up where there's a strong enough shear that this cloud is actually rotating in this sense. It's not the vertical rotation, but a horizontal rotation. But that can look pretty scary, especially if it's fast or if it's a big dark cloud. But the rotation is in the wrong sense. It's horizontal. All right, back to the updraft now. We're going to look for signs of rotation, signs of potential tornado. The updraft on the inflow side of the storm. Okay, so those pictures we were looking at where the wind was blowing away from us into the storm, you could see the rain in the distance. The updraft was between us and where the rain was. In this picture, you've got a nice, beautiful, flat updraft area. Where's that tower that we're looking at? The tower is right over the updraft. Okay, so the air is coming in, getting lifted up here, going straight up. Here's your downdraft over here in the rain. Okay, so this is the area you're going to be looking for a wall cloud or tornado to form. And you guys have heard of supercells? Definition of a supercell. Rotating updraft, and I'll add organized, long-lived. We have a lot of stuff in cloud that rotates a little bit. Whether that fits the definition of a supercell, it's not really a supercell structure. We have a lot of stuff that rotates weakly, but a supercell will have a persistent rotating updraft that kind of organizes the storm. All right, game on this video is where's the updraft, where's the downdraft? Which side of the picture is the updraft? Left side. Okay. Updraft over here, flat cloud base. Here's the precipitation. Same thing, here's your updraft. Something interesting happening there, but we don't get to see what happens. Okay, and it's pointed toward the rain, too. Where's the updraft?
Right.
This area in here. Left side is the updraft here. Okay, in this case, the rain was kind of in the back and the right side. Okay, how about here? Rain is kind of in the back on this one. The updraft is in the front, and there's that lowering. In this case, the rain is in the background, and the updraft is in the front. Okay, you have cloud elements going up in there, signs of a strong updraft. It's forming a wall cloud. Right, where's the updraft in this picture? You get rain in the back. Guy says it's a gustnado, but it really wasn't. Okay, not too hard to find the updraft there. Right, this is not a funnel cloud, but it is little cloud elements getting formed because the updraft is getting stronger. Right. So there's a lowering in the updraft. The downdraft is back behind. And a little bit of rotation, maybe. It's mostly upward motion in those cloud elements. All right, can you find the updraft there? Follow the dust, right? And then the rain is back behind it. He's got a lot of dust blowing around into the cloud, and he's excited about it. All right, what are we looking at here? You find an updraft? Right? That's deceiving at first. You can't really tell for sure that there's not something organized there, but if you watch it for a minute, you see that it's not really a rotating connected thing. It's just dust getting lifted up. Okay. Those kind of situations are hard because sometimes you'll see a tornado that look like that, but if you watch it for a minute, if you don't have any history of it and you just saw that first picture when it came on there, you wouldn't really know for sure. But if you've been watching it, you'll probably see that there isn't rotation at the cloud base. That the column of dust isn't really rotating. It's mostly just getting lifted. Again, that's a sign of a strong updraft, but it's not a tornado. All right, let's talk about the direction. Okay, we're in Fort Collins. Stuff's going nuts. I live in Greeley, and stuff always blows up right as it goes over my house and gets interesting. Just east of me, and there's rain and hail, and I get nothing. So we're looking out east of Greeley from Fort Collins, and what can we see in this picture?
An anvil.
Okay, there's a nice anvil there. What else? Is the mic still on?
No.
Something's happened here. Still on?
Nope.
No?
Grab the other one underneath.
And this one doesn't have battery, I don't think.
Nope.
Which is why there are batteries under here. Mike, would you mind dealing with that? I'll just talk loud for a minute. Can you, for somebody?
Batteries. There's a couple batteries under the shelf right next to it.
Yeah, I think there's some under here, but.
Could be down there, the batteries.
Yeah. Can you deal with that? I don't want to make everybody wait. All right, so what kind of updraft do we have here? Take a look at that. Does that look weak or strong?
Strong.
Okay, it's a pretty strong updraft. It's a fairly big storm. It looks like it's quite a ways away. All right. All right, let's go to a different side of the storm. Let's put ourselves out in Kersey, looking at the other side of the storm.
Whoa.
Okay? So the point is, we don't want you to be in this position to be inferring what's happening underneath that storm because you can't see it. Okay? Is that better? All right. Thank you, Mike. So we want you to tell us what you can see. Or you can tell us what you can't see, but we don't want you to infer that there's not something there. One of my early tornado experiences was the night of the Buffalo Creek flash flood in 1997, I believe it was, in the spring. And at the same time that was going on, we had a supercell moving through Broomfield. And we had spotters who were at 120th and Main in Broomfield telling us we got really heavy rain and a lot of hail, but there's no tornado. They were disputing the fact that other people were reporting a tornado and said, there's no tornado. And there was a tornado about 2 blocks away from them.
Wow.
But they couldn't see it because there was really heavy rain and hail. And this was one of the big Denver Skywarn guys. So it wasn't somebody who was, completely inexperienced, but either he didn't know better or he was so excited that he forgot about that. And he was just telling us, I'm really close to where they say a tornado is and I don't see one. Well, it's because you can't see. And he was actually that was a pretty precarious spot to be. It's harder when you're in a big city to move around. And so if you wind up even a city the size of Fort Collins with the traffic and the way the streets are and how you can see less, it was also, I think, about sunset. You got to be careful with that kind of thing. And if you're in an area where there aren't very many roads or it's hard to get around, you got to give yourself some extra margin. You have a question? Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so that would have been like a rain-wrapped tornado, or what do they mean by a rain-wrapped tornado, and how would you tell?
In that case, it was going to be a rain-wrapped tornado, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But essentially, in the supercell, the whole storm is rotating. And so the rain-wrapped tornado is where the heaviest rain and hail kind of starts on one side of the storm, but it can eventually get wrapped all the way around. That's what a hook echo on the radar is it's the precipitation wrapping around the storm. And if that makes it far enough around the storm and there's enough of it, it can block your view of the tornado to where Instead of being able to see the tornado from maybe a 180-degree angle on one side of the storm, that as that precipitation wraps around, the angle that you can see it from gets to be smaller and smaller. And that was the case for that storm. You can have this though, even without a rain-wrapped tornado, if you're in that heavy rain and hail area. The Windsor tornado could have been that way if there had been more precipitation. They had very large hail out ahead of it, but it wasn't enough to block the view. So you had, the video from Windsor is the softballs dropping into the lake, but you could still see the big tornado in the background. If there had been more precipitation with that, they might not have been able to see it coming. Yes?
So if you see a hook echo on radar, by definition that's a rain-wrapped tornado?
Not necessarily. It's headed that way. Most of the time, especially around here, you're going to be able to see through that rain. It's pretty rare for it to get wrapped up that far. We do, as you get farther, like into the eastern quarter of the state, places I've seen rain-wrapped tornadoes, Lyman, out from there, out eastward, where you get into a moisture environment, it happens more often. The hook itself is sort of a sign that wrapping is starting to happen. More of an indication of that process happening. Fortunately, you can usually still see through it. You get farther east, it's not the case anymore, and you get that obscuration problem a lot more. All right, let me get that. All right, so what we don't want you to say here is there's no tornado, because you can't tell. And a lot of times we'll ask, if we're really on the ball, we'll ask about that. Can you see underneath the base of the storm? Sometimes even if you're in the right place, but there's a little hill in the way, you can't see. If you can't see what's happening under the base of the storm, you can. And we're asking about tornadoes. Say, well, I can't see anything, but I don't have a good view. Versus, I've got a good view of the storm. I know we've had this a lot the last couple of years with stuff around Greeley. Since the Windsor tornado, people are nervous, and it's really helpful to have somebody on the radio, and we can say, okay, does anybody have a good view of the storm? Can tell me that there is or isn't a tornado. But the important part of that question, the first part of that question is just as important. Is there anybody who has a good view of that part of the storm? You got to be on the right side of the storm and have a good view of it. And then you can answer the question, is there a tornado? Okay, I'm going to talk about the spectrum of, we have sort of families of thunderstorms. I'm going to take you from the least organized thunderstorm up to the most organized storm, starting with single cell storms, then clusters, squall lines, and then the most organized thunderstorm is the supercell. Along with organization tends to come a longer lifetime and also greater strength in general, because organization tends to lead to those things. So we're going to start with our pulse thunderstorms, and this is one bubble of hot air that for whatever reason, a spot gets warm, the air rises, the moisture condenses, precipitation falls out, it chokes itself off, storm's over. Okay, this happens when you have weak winds, so as the air rises, it comes down, when the downdraft forms, it comes down on itself. Typically driven by solar heating, so this is a mid to late afternoon event. Sometimes they're weak, but they don't have to be weak. And particularly if you've got a lot of moisture available, if you've got a lot of energy to be released in these bubbles, they can be strong, but they don't last very long. Your severe weather threat is a short period of intense rain, hail, damaging winds as that collapses. If you get a lot of mass lifted up in the air and it all comes down at once, you can have some very strong winds. If you've got a lot of energy that's being released, you can get large hail out of that because you had a strong updraft for 15 minutes. Okay? Long enough to make big hail. More often than not, they don't last long enough to create severe weather. So here's what it looks like. The red is your updraft. And so you have your updraft. When you have your downdraft, it comes down in almost the same place because you have light winds. So that precipitation hasn't really moved from where it started. And so the downdraft, the storm essentially kills itself. Okay? The air goes up, the air comes back down. You can't sustain the updraft because there's rain falling into it. And it's over. Half hour, 45 minutes. Here's kind of what this looks like in a typical, and this is kind of your typical quiet day, little thunderstorm, it rumbles 3 or 4 times, you get a little bit of rain. So in this stage, you're still mostly updraft. You're starting to get a little rain coming out of it. And a little while later now, you're more rain, the updraft's weakening. Notice you never really had a good, solid updraft. Okay, you don't have that big, flat, cloud-free, or the big, flat, rain-free base. Okay, it's kind of pokey, there's holes in it. Okay, so it never really was very strong. Next step up our organizational ladder is a multi-cell cluster of thunderstorms, probably the primary mode of convection that we have in eastern Colorado. And this is where you have these families of updrafts that kind of feed off each other, and there's enough wind to sort of help them get organized so that as one collapses, another one grows next to it. Perhaps the precipitation is blown in a preferred direction, and as that outflow wind comes, it starts a new updraft. And so there might be a preferred method of growth on this. So you'll get these little lines. And this one is still fairly disorganized because the flanking line picture we had earlier, they were all sort of lined up in a certain direction. But in this case, it's kind of going every which way. So maybe you have outflow on both sides of a storm, and sometimes you get a new cell developing on one side, and sometimes you don't. And so you might have kind of this random evolution of it. But there's enough wind to sort of keep new updrafts forming. And so it's sort of like a family where, eventually one generation dies, but the next generation is there to replace it. That's our multi-cell cluster. And they can be strong. It depends on what's available, how much moisture is available. Squall lines is another step up, and in this case, you've sort of got a preferred mode of evolution where the new cell is always kind of growing on the same side. And a lot of times you have a linear wind shift feature that's big enough to organize things. And so a classic example of this would be a cold front that goes all the way in the springtime. We had some of these in the last couple of weeks. You got a cold front that goes from Michigan to Texas. And there's a wind shift on that line where the moist air is being forced upward by the cold front. And so all along this line you've got a source of lift where the thunderstorms can develop. And then you've got outflow from those storms that feeds back into the cold front and pushes it forward. And that can sustain itself for a day or two. And it's not a good day to try to be flying across the country. Okay? There's days where there's been solid thunderstorms from Dallas to Detroit. And they have to wait, or they do route flights over Canada. Or they'll send planes over Houston, even if you're flying from New York to San Francisco. You'll get a scenic tour. So that's sort of the extreme example of it. But the dangerous thing, the primary problem with squall lines is damaging winds. And what happens is because you're sustaining the circulation for a day, it can slowly amplify where if each of these thunderstorm cells adds 5 miles an hour to the wind that was already there, and the thing goes on for 10 hours, do the math. Okay? You just added 50 miles an hour to your wind field, and what you wind up with is in this area right behind the front in the outflow of these thunderstorms, by the 5th cycle, you got a 25 mile an hour wind field. By the 10th cycle, you might have a 50 mile an hour wind field. It's organized enough that it can amplify itself. And so you can have large areas of strong winds with this. And these are the cases where a whole state might have wind damage of 50 to 70 mile an hour winds because you had a very large area of strong winds. You can get tornadoes, particularly places where one part of the line will surge out ahead of itself, and you can start getting a little twisting on the edge. One of those lines that gets sucked up into a thunderstorm updraft, and you can get tornadoes in those areas. You can get hail. You've got organized updrafts. Again, the updraft could be amplified as well. So the wind threat is the primary threat, but you can have hail and tornadoes with these also. So here's a look at our eastern Colorado multi-cell line. You're on I-70, you just got into Colorado, you're looking forward to getting home, and you see this ahead of you. Okay? This is that shelf cloud. Looks really ominous. Not a tornado, but you guys probably experienced this. What happens when that comes over you?
Wind.
Okay, the wind starts, right? Temperature change? Yeah, it gets cold, it gets windy. In this case, what else are we probably going to have? hail or heavy rain, you can't see through that thing, so there's quite a bit of precipitation of some kind there. And so that cloud marks the point where that updraft is running into the downdraft, and you'll have the start of the thunderstorm outflow winds and precipitation and all of that. All right, we're at the top of our food chain here, the supercell. Okay, remember the definition of a supercell is a thunderstorm with a persistent rotating updraft. And to get that, we have to have a lot of wind shear. And we have to get the strong updraft, we also have to have quite a bit of buoyancy. So we're looking for a balance between the buoyancy and the wind shear. And what happens in the supercell is, here's your updraft. Okay, is the rain next to it? No. The rain is blown quite a bit downwind of it. And it's far enough away that that downdraft does not interfere with the updraft. In fact, it can get set up in a certain direction if the wind shear is right, so that that downdraft actually can enhance the inflow into the storm. But this storm is not going to kill itself. That's the main thing, is it can continue and persist. And it can amplify. And again, the strong supercells, the problem with them is that they, over a course of several hours, they'll amplify. And the supercell tornadoes don't happen right at the very beginning. But that circulation amplifies with time. But the problem is that they can get large and strong and long-lasting. The tornadoes they had in Alabama were, they went all the way across the state. And they were large and long-lasting. And so that's the real danger, is that organization leads to intensity and duration. Here's a look at one in real life. There's your updraft. Here's your flanking line. Downdraft's way over here. Not going to talk about it in depth, but if you look at the, most of the anvil is going off to the right of the picture, but there is some of it that's going back to the left. That's what we call a back shear anvil. In this case, the winds at that level are going from left to right in this picture. But that updraft is so strong. Think about what happens if you put your hand into the river. Okay? What happens upstream of your hand?
Hells up.
Okay? There's a little wave. It's the bow wave on the front of a boat. It'd be the same thing. And in this case, there's enough of an updraft that actually acts like a solid object, and it actually is separating the flow upwind of it a little ways. And so some of that moisture is actually able to go back into the wind, into the prevailing wind, just like the bow wave on the boat, where that water's getting stood up ahead of the solid object. And I'll just point that out because it's another sign of the strong, in this case, it goes quite a ways, so that's a very strong updraft because of the extent of that back shear part of the anvil. All right, we're getting close to what we want here, wall cloud. Again, your updraft area is this huge flat area here. That updraft is getting concentrated into a smaller space. Right in this little area here, you have this lower cloud base. That means your updraft is being focused there. You have stronger vertical motions, lower pressure. That allows the cloud base to lower. And more so down in here. Now that may be partly because it's a little moisture because it's close to the inflow, but it's also partly because the pressure's the lowest in this area. Is it pointed toward the rain or away from the rain?
Toward.
Okay, it's bent down toward the rain. So it's not being driven by the air being lifted up over. If it were being driven by the air lifting up over the outflow, it would be pointed the other direction. So this is being driven by the lowering of the pressure because of the updraft being focused in that place. Okay. Same kind of thing, we got a nice wall cloud underneath our rain-free base. I want to point out the roundness here. See how round that shape is? Okay. Things that rotate get round real fast because they're rotating. Anything that's sticking out kind of gets flung off or sucked in. So that round shape indicates rotation. And that'll be a difference if you're looking at, if you see ragged pieces below the cloud base, kind of loose ragged things, that means your motion is primarily up. If you see smooth round things, that means you've got good rotation as well. That's one thing to look for when you're looking at, is it scud or is it a funnel cloud? Is that funnel cloud should take on a pretty smooth appearance, smooth and round appearance pretty quickly if it's got any decent rotational speed to it, as opposed to places where that wall cloud's trying to form and you've got those little kind of ragged fragments going up in the air. If there's an organized rotation, it should get smooth around pretty quick. Another thing to look for is things that look like the ridges on a screw. Okay, if something is a little more moist over here, it's getting wrapped around the storm like that, and you can even see it in these little lines here. You can see that as things are rising here, they're also rotating around that updraft. Here's your wall cloud. Again, bent down a little bit towards. It's kind of hard to see where the rain is relative to the cloud here, but so most likely over on this side is where you've got the strongest rising motion. And then a lot of times you'll have a nice wall cloud, meaning strong updraft, not much rotation. Real common in Colorado too is we have a lot of strong updrafts without strong rotation here. We have deep convection every day. Strong updrafts, a lot of heat, not necessarily the rotation. So just because you see that shape hanging down, then the question is it rotating? Is it taking on a round shape? Do you see elements that are rotating? You got a question here.
Rotating, I'm getting confused. Is it rotating like a hurricane or tornado?
Correct.
Or rotating up and down?
No, rotating in that I'll call it the vertical sense, where it's rotating about a vertical axis. Right. So you'd be looking for this. You'd be looking for maybe shreds of cloud moving this way in the front of the picture. A lot of times you can look for stuff in the foreground moving right and stuff in the background moving left. That kind of a thing. Sometimes it's hard to see that, but that's a pretty good sign. If it's in the right place, if it's associated with the updraft, with the wall cloud. A lot of times you'll see that maybe at the front of the storm, just because you've got a wind shift, but you want it to be in the right place. If you see stuff at the front of this cloud moving from left to right, maybe it's rotating, and if you can see stuff moving the other way in the back of it, that's a real good sign. Does it become round? Did it start kind of rectangular and now it's getting rounder? Is it continuing to lower? A lot of things have looked like somebody attached a bowl. Somebody attached a bowl to the bottom of this, and it's kind of hanging down. Again, that round shape indicates that there is as much rotation going on as lift.
Question.
Yes?
So when you see scud in a situation like that, that's less indicative that there's going to actually be any rotation. It's actually less formation than, right?
Well, the first thing the scud tells you is you got moisture condensation. If you've got organization, a lot of times the first thing you'll see when a wall cloud develops is you'll see that scud. And it may be lifting up into the cloud, and that's because the pressure is lowering in that spot. So it's a precursor. It could be a precursor to that. But it's more indicative of the updraft, and of the updraft getting concentrated. You want, if you have scud that's not only developing, going up into the cloud, but also rotating, that is important. But the scud itself is more of an indication of the vertical motion of the updraft part of it. So then you want to, then the second thing is, okay, do we have rotation yet? And if it gets to this point, this is something we definitely want to call. We want you to say, I have a wall cloud, I have a persistent wall cloud, I have a rotating wall cloud, if that's the case. Because what we're looking at with the radar can tell us, well, we got a storm rotating, we got the right environment. What you're doing then by describing this process happening is telling us what stage it's at. We're trying to decide, is this close enough to making a tornado, we need to issue a warning on it. All right, we've touched on some of this already. Go through it and try to make it clear. This is what the supercell looks like. We're looking down from above. And in this case, we have a storm that, let's just say it's moving from west to east. So you'll have inflow coming in from the south or southeast. Your updraft is right at here. This is the center of your storm rotation. So you have air coming in, getting lifted up, and then the precipitation is being blown downwind. Okay? You wind up with your smaller things fly farther. So you'll have light rain out here. Large hail is not going to fly very far. Okay? You could throw a golf ball farther than you could throw a softball. Right? So your softballs don't go as far. And so you wind up with an area of heavy rain right in close to where that updraft is. And since this is rotating, some of that starts to wrap back around the center of rotation. And so a lot of times these look like kidney beans or pork chops. One of our older forecasters when I came here said if If it looks like a pork chop and it's got red the size of your thumb, issue a warning on it. That's the previous generation's science. It worked. It worked a lot. I mean, it was what they could do. So the rain wrapped part is when this has persisted long enough, the combination of how long this persists and how strong the rotation is, where that starts to wrap all the way back around. You wind up with your hook echo. Your hook echo is this precipitation wrapping back around. And what that does is it starts to focus this updraft in a narrower and narrower place. And I apologize, I'm getting a little into the advanced spotter training here, but again, we're trying to downscale all of that to focus it in one place like the skater pulling their arms in. That's what produces a tornado. A lot of times your downdraft will actually get separated where you've got the stuff that was able to fly forward and then you've got the part that was rotating around. It's called the rear flank downdraft. And it may sit in this mode where you've got sort of the kidney bean shape for a long time, maybe the first couple of hours as it's getting organized. But as you start to get this rear flank downdraft, then a lot of times that's the point at which the tornado forms. Because you're starting to focus all that rotation updraft into a smaller and smaller space. So where are your cloud features going to be? Out here in front of it, on the front of your rain, is going to be your shelf cloud. Your flanking line is back down here. Generally, you've got wind converging along here, so you may have. What happens is you sort of have your updraft isn't completely stable. You have kind of new updrafts forming, but they're getting sucked right into the same place. And so this circulation is persistent, even as there might be little variations of the updraft isn't necessarily completely steady state, but the circulation is, and so you have new updrafts that form in the same place. So sometimes you will see supercells kind of oscillate, and they'll peak and they'll decrease a little bit, they'll peak and decrease, but the structure of the thing continues. So there's your flanking line. On a supercell, your updraft is right in here. And those towers will literally move into the storm and just become part of it. So it's a process of air flowing through this whole thing, but the process stays the same. Okay? Here's your shelf cloud out in front with the precipitation behind it. And here's the life cycle of that downscaling. You've got a very large rain-free base with a little lowering, a little bit of a wall cloud. It's not really well defined, but it definitely is a lowering. And it is kind of round. And then what you'll see happen eventually, and possibly through the process of that first you're going to see scud forming, and eventually it fills in, and where the whole thing is condensed, you'll see this distinct lowering. Okay, so you've got one scale of motion there, you've got a smaller scale of motion here, and you get down another order of magnitude here to get the tornado itself. And so something has concentrated that rotation down into a space that might be 100 yards or 200 yards wide. Supercell storms produce pretty much every kind of severe weather that we have. They can produce large and damaging tornadoes. Again, if you've got a mile-wide, 80-mile-an-hour circulation that lasts for a couple hours, then you've got what happened in Alabama the other day. It was more than 180 miles an hour there. But so this tends to be the way that you get the large, long-track tornadoes that do a lot of damage. But you don't have to have a supercell to get a tornado. This is the hard part. Okay? Everything up to now is the easy part because you knew what to look for. We had time to see it happen. Okay. Visible, partly. Looks like it goes through that other cloud. That's kind of strange. Okay. The supercell is driven by the storm scale rotation. Okay. In the non-supercell storm, we don't need to have any storm scale rotation. We've got tornado scale rotation. Okay, but it doesn't have to be from the storm that's rotating. The supercell forms from the top down. Non-supercell storms form from tornadoes form from the bottom up. Okay, supercell has a mesocyclone, rotating thunderstorm. Not in the non-supercell storm. In the supercell, you get the thunderstorm first, you get rotation, then you get a tornado. In the non-supercell storm, a lot of times the tornado will form early on. You get an updraft, and you get a tornado, and then you get a thunderstorm. On the supercell, you can look on the radar and see the kidney bean with the big blotch of red and the hook echo on it and the rotation. On the non-supercell storm, what we're looking for is boundaries. Boundaries with thunderstorms developing on top of them. Supercell we do pretty well with. I won't say it's impossible to miss, but usually you've got some pretty good indications of what's going on. We still have questions about the details, but it's not hard to spot the big picture. Non-supercell storms, or non-supercell tornadoes, it's much harder. Fortunately, the non-supercell tornadoes tend to be weak, and they tend to be short-lived. And guess which one of these things you can help us the most with? Non-supercells, because they're not as easy to see on the radar. And they happen fast. And most of our tornadoes in Colorado are non-supercell tornadoes. All right, here's how we did last year with tornadoes. Larimer County had none. Sorry. Weld County had 6. We're doing all right. Kiowa County went nuts one day. Most of those were in one day, a couple hours. And they just had a setup where tornadoes kept forming along this little boundary. So they just had this family of tornadoes. Here's the history of the last 60 years. Weld County has more tornadoes than any other county in the nation. We cheat a little bit because it's a big county. But even on a per square mile basis, it's right in there. Harris County, Texas is second. That's where Houston is. It's also a fairly large county. On a per square mile basis, though, the area, say, east of Interstate 25 from about Castle Rock northward is right up there with Tornado Alley as far as the number of tornadoes. Ours tend to be weaker, so if you look at numbers like violent tornadoes or tornado damage, then Oklahoma, Texas, Kansas stand out more. But as far as the actual number of tornadoes, that little area from Denver up into Weld County is right in the thick of things with central Oklahoma. As you get into southeastern Colorado, it's fewer. We do have tornadoes in the mountains, just about everywhere, just not very many. We don't want you to be the guy in the minivan. Okay, that minivan was on the road somewhere. So to avoid it, Mike said, stay. We want to be a mile away or more. We want to have a good view, but we also want to be as far away as we can and have a good view. Know where you're going. Watching at an intersection is great because you got a lot of choices about where to go. You got to be smarter than the storm and think ahead and what might the storm do and where can I go. Be prepared for them to change the direction. Your strongest storms, your supercells, do change direction. And they tend to change direction at the time where they're going from being sort of your ordinary, sort of low-key, yeah, it's a supercell, but it's not doing much, to being violent and making that tornado. That also tends to be the time where they turn right. Some of our strongest storms in northeastern Colorado chug along down Interstate 80. Remember, we're responsible for the Colorado side of the border. They chug down Interstate 80, make it big hail, minor flooding, and then all of a sudden they're in Colorado. And now they're moving south-southeast toward Sterling, and we got about a half hour to warn them. So they do change direction. The standard advice is never outrun a tornado. Get to a sturdy shelter if threatened. This is hard to hear because we can see so far. And it's harder to give that advice because if you're in Rhode Island and you can only see 3 miles, you're too close if you can see the tornado. In Colorado, a lot of times you can sit and watch something that's 20 miles away and you're not really in any danger. But the point is that if you're close to that tornado, don't count on your car getting you out of the way. If you're close to that tornado, if you're in Windsor and that tornado's coming down the hill, right? Get yourself into a shelter because you may only have a minute or two, and you may get to a place where a tree's blown down across the road. And then what are you going to do? You do not want to be in a vehicle in a tornado. Were you in a vehicle, Mike?
Yes.
You were in a vehicle. Yeah. Pleasant experience?
Not fun at all.
No. I have another friend who was also in a vehicle on 257 and was very fortunate to survive. He got a lot of stuff in his back that had to get picked out painfully. But he had a tree fell on his car and held it down, otherwise he would have been flying.
I was moving around.
Yeah. The car wanted to fly, right?
It wanted to, but a basketball stanch and a few other things were.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Cars will fly. Cars also like to be boats given the right circumstance. We'll get to that later. Cars are not that safe of a place to be. They're built to be safe in highway collisions, but not in tornadoes. Look at the windows on that van. Okay. My other friend told me, the windows were sucked out and the debris came in. They also fly. That one looks like it's rolled. So you want to get yourself into a sturdy shelter. It's a great opportunity to make a new friend. Hey, there's a tornado coming. Can I come in? It'll work. General rules about what to do if the tornado's coming. The whole idea is to protect your body. Get as much stuff as possible between your body and the debris. The hazard is flying debris or falling debris hitting your body. So that's why basements are great. Is in even the strongest tornado, that floor, if you got a floor that's level with the ground, is going to stand up pretty well. Even if you get some pieces ripped out of it, you still got a fair amount of shelter because horizontal stuff isn't going to hit you because it's going to fly over the hole. And so even in the strongest tornado, if you're in a basement, you're in a pretty good spot. In a basement under a mattress is even better. If you don't have a basement, get as many walls in between you and the outside as you can. If you have an interior room in your house, a bathroom or a closet that's not an outside wall, that's a pretty good place to be because you've got two sets of walls. Small room is good because the walls are close together. They're more likely to support each other, and the ceiling above it is more likely to stay together just because there's not very much distance there between the walls, so the walls give a lot of support to that little box. There's stories of people being carried in their flying house, in their bathroom, or their closet, and they come out, and the house either blew apart or shattered when it hit the ground, but that interior room held together because it had an extra layer of protection. Getting under something, there were some stories from Alabama about people who, some of them got under something. More often they said, well, this heavy thing fell on me, but it saved my life. Because then it shielded them from the debris because they were under their bed or under the dresser that fell and kind of protected them. My only experience with that was a tornado that I issued a warning on in Haxton, and it destroyed 3 homes, I think, and one of them, this was almost a tornado fatality. The guy's easy chair fell on top of him, and then the wall fell on top of the easy chair. And his wife was screaming at him for 10 minutes, come downstairs, come downstairs, come downstairs. There must have been something good on TV, and he was Wheel of Fortune. And he would not go downstairs, and he was saved by the lazy boy. If you're in a mobile homes are not designed to withstand tornadoes. They'll withstand 50, 60 mile an hour winds usually. We have had fatalities in Colorado from straight line winds destroying mobile homes. That's rare. But for a tornado, it's just not up to, the wind might be able to handle the wind, but there's going to be boards flying around, and those boards will go right through the walls. And once that happens, then you got a hole, and then the thing will blow apart. So we tell people who live in mobile homes, plan ahead. Have a shelter you can go to if there's a community room or office at the mobile home park. A lot of times that's a good shelter that's right there. Make friends with a neighbor who says, yeah, it's okay, come over if the storm's coming, and hang out with us for half an hour. But plan ahead and have that's as important as your fire safety plan. And just have, where's our tornado spot? Where do we go to? That's true for anybody in any home. Have just like a meeting spot after the fire starts in your house. How are you going to get out? Where are we going to meet? Where's our tornado spot? Here's damage for Windsor. Okay, this is pretty typical of the part of Windsor that was damaged heavily. The core part of this house, if you look at sort of the big scale structure of this house, is actually in pretty good condition. Okay, you've got that box. There was probably a bedroom over the garage that got sheared off here. We saw a lot of garages. The garage door would fail, and then that's a big sail catching the wind, and that part of the house will get torn up pretty badly. But the middle part of this house is in pretty good shape, except for the debris coming through the windows. So you don't want to be sitting in the living room there. But if there's a bathroom, if you've got a hallway with a bathroom off to the side of it, that bathroom was not a bad place to be at all. Because you've got 2 layers around you, and you're protected from the debris coming in through the windows. Basement, of course, is a lot better. The basement is where I would want to be in this case. But if there's no basement, the interior of that, behind the bricks in the front, is not a bad place to be here. Don't want to be in the car. Look at all those boards. Boards, nails, glass. You don't want that in your body, especially at 100 miles an hour. All right, tornadoes get all the glory. Question?
Quick question about basements. Is under the staircase in the basement usually a good place to go?
I think as far as the idea of protecting your body, I would say yes. That's usually, I think in my house, that's the best spot. There's a bathroom down there that's probably similar, but you're going to be shielded in all kinds of different ways. I think a little bit about, what if that comes off of its anchorings and comes down, but that's pretty unlikely to happen, especially if it's all below ground. Those things are usually anchored, they're in a pretty secure spot if it's something that's going downstairs. It'd be a lot easier to move the upstairs one than the downstairs one. So I think that's a good spot. It tends to be full of stuff, though. At least in my house. So it'd take a minute or two to get in there. But yes. All right, I'm going to go quickly through a couple other hazards. Lightning is our #1 killer, and we've had 3 tornado fatalities in Colorado in the last 40 years. Okay? Gets a lot of attention. They're dangerous. They usually miss stuff. Lightning's dangerous because we have a lot of it every day and we get complacent. Okay, lightning wants to hit the highest thing around. It's electricity that wants to get from the cloud to the ground. Wants to take a shortcut, so it's going to hit high objects or it's going to hit objects that conduct electricity like metal. Right? So we do not want to be the highest object around. And we don't want to be standing next to the highest object around. Okay? Trees are the usual target here. So the tree, a lot of times, is taking a lot of the rain, so it's dry under the tree, so people want to go to the tree to get out of the rain. Not what we want to do in a thunderstorm. Okay, get inside.
What if you're outside? What if you're up in the mountains?
If you're up in the mountains, it's hard. The good thing is, if you're in a forest where all the trees are equal height, then they sort of all have equal odds. I mean, the correct answer to that question is to plan ahead so that you try to minimize the chance of being in that situation. And yeah, you can't avoid it if you hike a lot. But to try to make your plans to reduce that danger, that's why you start early in the morning. You want to be off the peaks by noon because our thunderstorms start up there about noon. And be aware of the situation, and if the weather's developing faster than you thought it was, if you're half mile from the lake and you hear that first rumble of thunder, run that last half mile so you can see the lake and then turn around, or just turn around. But be aware so that you can adapt your plans as the threat evolves. A lot of it depends on how far away you are from shelter too. But there are preferred places, not preferred places, and if you're a big hiker, look around, look for those dead trees. The spot where the trail comes up to the outlook, where you can look over the valley and see the waterfalls coming down. It's a little knob of rock, and usually if you look around there, usually you're standing in the middle of a bunch of dead trees, okay? Because it's a little bit of a point where it's sticking out, those trees are on top of it. So if you look around and see where those dead lightning-struck trees are, you'll get some feel for whether it's a good place to be or not. But ideally, you try to avoid being in that situation as best you can. Get off the ridge. The ridge is the high spot. So if you're up above timberline and there's no way, it's going to be 2 or 3 miles to get down, you might just want to head downhill because lightning is probably going to strike the high things. We are tied for second for lightning fatalities by the state. Florida cheats because Florida has thunderstorms all year. So does Texas. We have a lot. Part of this is because we're outside a lot. We're outside a lot in lightning-sensitive spots like the mountains. But part of it is that we have a lot of lightning. Here's the lightning frequency. This is flashes per year per square kilometer. So if you want square miles, double that roughly. The area between Colorado Springs and Denver on the higher terrain there, preferred place for thunderstorms to form. We're talking about 10 strikes per square mile per year. A lot of barns down there that have lightning rods for some reason. The risk is high enough to make it well worthwhile. Lower risk up in the valleys up here where the thunderstorm frequency is lower, but it's still a pretty good number if you're looking at a couple lightning strikes per square mile. per year. I mean, it's going to be close. It's around. These two spots, by the way, are in a tie with the place just east of Tampa for the highest lightning frequency in the country. And I believe there's a couple other spots in the world that have a similar frequency. So safety is plan ahead. Go hiking in the morning. Watch the sky. See that storm coming. When thunder roars, go indoors if you like rides. If you're inside your house, you're pretty safe. Even if lightning strikes your house, it's not going to go through your body. Okay, it's about impossible if you're in your house to get that lightning bolt into your body. It's actually a small channel with strong electricity and heat. It's usually the heat that does the most damage, although it can stop people's hearts. Do you want to be on a golf course? Okay? Our golf courses around here don't have very many trees either. Okay? And you're holding a metal object up in the air. All right? Where do you go at the ball field when a thunderstorm comes and it starts to rain? People want to go to the dugout because it's dry and it's close. Okay, what's the dugout next to? Dugout's next to a fence, the dugout's next to the backstop, and a lot of times the dugout's next to a nice tall metal pole that's a great target. Okay? And if that pole gets hit, the fence might get electrified too. Okay? Not the best place to be, and usually your car is right there. Cars are an excellent place to be. Two things make it that way. One is that there's rubber underneath you, so the car is not in contact with the ground. It's not grounded. And so the lightning's probably going to choose another route to get to the ground. Also, it's a metal ball, and so if lightning does strike it, the charge is going to travel through the metal around the outside of the vehicle. And so even if the car gets hit, it's pretty unlikely for that charge to get into your body. It's not a pleasant experience, but it's still relatively safe. It's a whole lot better than standing outside where you're the lightning rod. Being home is the best. Some of these rules are getting a little less relevant. The telephone thing only counts if the telephone's actually connected to the wire outside your house, which is on the pole. If you're using a cordless phone, you're fine. Cell phone, same deal. The shower and the electrical appliances, the risk there is that lightning will strike the power line outside and have the charge come in. Again, if you're in a place where the power lines are buried, the risk there is quite a bit lower. If you're either ultra conservative about protecting your stuff, or you've got really nice stuff that you want to protect, you can protect it by unplugging it when there's a thunderstorm going through. My stuff isn't that great, but if but it does, once it's disconnected from the outside world, then it's safe. Lightningsafety.no.gov if you want more information. And this I got to show you another. Get to another page here. Apologize, this takes a second. All right. Our number 2 killer, actually avalanches are number 2. So the number 3 killer in Colorado is flooding. People underestimate the power of water. Water is very heavy. I had a bunch of 4th graders trying to use a super soaker the other day, and when it was full, they couldn't pull the trigger. They were having a hard time because the water's heavy. So the water gets a few inches deep if it's moving, and it'll move your car, and then your car becomes a boat. We don't want to be in the car when it's a plane, and we don't want to be in the car when it is being a boat. I think most of these cars stay upside right, but cars do float upside down pretty well too. This is last year in Queensland, Australia. They had some flooding that was the worst they'd had in 40 or 50 years. And it was only a few minutes from that stream being in its banks to being up in the parking lot. What you don't realize is once it gets out of its banks, a lot of times the ground is flat, and it can spread out real quick, so it might be 50 feet away from you and suddenly be there. I do not know what the tire thing is. I don't know if that makes any difference.
Locking for 4-wheel drive or something?
If you really want to do that, the big thing is be fast, because the time is the most important ingredient there. I don't think the tire thing is. But don't trade your life for your Land Rover.
There you go.
He does have a snorkel on his car.
All right, if you can move a car like that, think about that water pushing on your ankles. Okay. The last flash flood death we had in Colorado was a Denver firefighter who was rescued. There was a woman who was walking across a flooded parking lot, and she got pulled by a current toward a drain, and was in danger of getting pulled down there. And he managed to pull her out of the drain, and then he couldn't get out of it. Okay, that's Denver firefighter. All right, he's stronger than the rest of us in this room. So. And the bad part of it, if you're in that car, what can you do?
Get out.
What are you going to do if you get out? Can you swim in that?
Well, so what do you do?
The other, well, you don't drive the car into the water. The other video that we used for this, that might show up during the break. You got a guy who his car flips over. He gets out of it. He's almost washed away. You see him stumbling a couple times trying to get up in the water. Then he walks out, and the water is about the top of his ankle, but it was moving really fast, and he almost drowned in ankle-deep water. So the rule for adults is don't drive into, make sure you don't drive into that kind of situation. It's hard because a lot of times, again, we're kind of accustomed to driving through shallow water, if water's 2 or 3 inches deep, we're kind of used to that situation, and the important part is distinguishing between that and when it's too much, and it's hard to tell sometimes. If it's over the curb, it's too deep, and if it's moving fast, it's too fast. Then we tell kids, if the water's where it's not supposed to be, it's probably not safe, and just stay out of it. Find the safe places to play, but that's not one of them. Big problem there is either with kids is either drains, and people don't realize there's a current going into the drain, or alternatively, there's some spots are deeper than others. These cars are really clean.
Inside and out.
Yeah, I got a deal for you. Look at that. Look at how shiny that is. The main thing I want you to be aware of from this is the power that's involved here and how quickly it can go downhill. In a matter of seconds or a minute, a foot of rise might be a big distance horizontally, so you might think you're safe and suddenly be kind of running for it. So safety trips. Watch out for the flooded roadways. Nighttime is bad because you can't make that distinction whether it's a safe situation or not. You can't tell how deep the water is. It's hard to see whether it's moving or not. You can't tell if the road is still there. A lot of rural roads will have culverts wash out, and all of a sudden there might be a 10-foot wide hole in the road, and you can't see it. During the daytime you might notice that. At night it's just about impossible. In Colorado, I said it was our third biggest killer behind avalanches and lightning. Nationwide, it's number 1. And the catchphrase is turn around, don't drown. Zip through this pretty fast, but I want to give you a quick overview of what you'll see on a thunderstorm day, what we give you to prepare for it. Storm Prediction Center in Norman, Oklahoma issues daily outlooks, sort of assessing where the main risk areas are on a given day. And then we issue a local outlook as well, called the Weather Story. We update this at around 6 o'clock in the morning, and then again about 11 o'clock in the morning every day on our website. And I'm going to have a handout here that you can pick up that has all these websites on it. The difference between a watch and a warning: on a day where we think there's a significant threat of severe weather, we'll issue either a severe thunderstorm or a tornado watch. That's issued by the Storm Prediction Center in Oklahoma. They're doing this, looking at this on a national scale, so the watch is going to be a large area. It might be the Nebraska Panhandle of northeastern Colorado from 3 p.m. until 9 p.m. Just saying this is an area of elevated risk. The warning, on the other hand, means something is happening now, or we think it's about to happen. That's issued by our local National Weather Service office. With a watch, the action that we want is just to be prepared, be aware. If there are some staging situations, some days in that hazardous weather outlook that we issue at 6 and 11 in the morning, we'll say spotter activation is expected this afternoon. That's a heads up to you guys that we're probably going to have a severe weather net running. We'll give the coordinator a call and make sure that they saw that. I'm sure you guys are looking at it anyway. Just to make sure that, and that's when we'll call a volunteer into our office to work the radio as well. When the warning's issued, the action we want is to protect yourself now because the hazard is happening. That's going to be for a part of the county. It might be northeastern Larimer, northwestern Weld counties. We'll list the towns. We'll say, Wellington, Carr, and Rockport. So the goal there is to be as specific as possible. Say this is the area that's threatened now. Take shelter. Any questions on the distinction between the watch and the warning? Okay, watch means watch out. Warning means do something. So the watches look like that. They're big chunks of states, whereas the warnings are small scale. That's what the warnings look like. We draw a box on our computer screen out ahead of the storm. We issue warnings for tornadoes. For severe thunderstorms, the definition is a 58-mile-an-hour wind gust or hail more than 1 inch in diameter. That's a new record hailstone that fell last year. 8 inches across and spiky. And probably 100-mile-an-hour fall speed. So we'll issue warnings for 1 inch diameter hail that is the size of a quarter and larger. We'll issue special weather statements for smaller hail. Some of it depends on how busy we are, but typically, half inch or larger hail, we'll try to throw out a special weather statement if we think it's not going to need a warning, just as a heads up. I'll skip over that one. Our webpage is weather.gov, easy to remember. If you add a slant Denver after that, that's our local office webpage. You can also just click on the national map, and it'll take you to the local office. Okay, come on. So we're asking you to report stuff to us. How do you do that? Okay. Most of you are amateur radio operators. That's one route. When there's a net running, it will be very easy to do that because we'll have somebody there who's going to be gathering reports, kind of organize it. When there's active weather up here, we try to listen to the northern Colorado frequency from our office, but That's not a guaranteed thing. We may or may not have an operator there. But if you got a net running up here, you can call that net operator. And if we're not on the radio, they'll call it into us right away. A lot of times they'll call and check and make sure, did you hear that? Because we may be doing more than one thing. We have an 800 phone number. That's answered around the clock. And when you get material sent to you here in a couple of weeks, it will have a list of things to report and that 800 number. You can also go on our website, and there's a place to enter reports there. And I'll show you that real quick. Over there, the upper left-hand side, submit report. And if you click on that, you'll get this form. You will get a spotter number that will be something like L249. If you're in Larimer County, I forget whether Weld is W or it might be WE.
No, it's W.
Okay, this is W322. We have Washington County to worry about too. But they get WA. And then here at the bottom, you'll fill out just in detail what happened. Half-inch hail occurring now, and wind gusts to 50 miles an hour, something like that. That goes down at the bottom there. And that gets to us in less than a minute. And we'll compile reports. In this case, it was for a snowstorm. We love getting snow reports too because snow is a lot like the tornadoes. We can kind of tell what's going on, but there's still a lot of guesswork too. Especially as you get farther away from the radar out toward Fort Morgan and Sterling. It snows a lot in Sterling, we don't even see it on the radar. So we compile these reports, so we not only use them for issuing warnings, but you'll see them in the newspaper the next day or on TV. They'll make a graphic that has storm reports that comes out of this product. All right, ready for our game? And then we'll take a break. Tornado or not?
Not.
Start with an easy one. Tornado or not?
Yes.
Thank you. It gets harder. All right. I don't really know if this is scud or if it's a cloud that's farther away. We got a rain-free base there, not a tornado. Got scud going up. Tornado? No. Wall cloud forming? Yes.
Yes, but
I don't see a lot of rotation there. It's mostly going up. It might be a little bit.
it's
There's a little bit of
going
rotation
away
over
from
here,
the
maybe.
rain.
Tornado or not?
Yeah,
I want to pan up a little bit, but does it look like it's connected to the cloud?
yeah. It looks rotating.
Well, it's kind of swirling back like this. I think that was just dust on the ground. Tornado or not? Big old rain shaft is what we have here. Here's your updraft on the left. All right. How about that? Is it in contact with the ground?
It's
Kind of hard to see for sure. No debris on the ground. It looks like it wasn't in contact with the ground, although I wouldn't be sure of it because we were looking over a hill a little bit. How about this?
Funnel cloud.
Funnel cloud about halfway. You could say funnel cloud halfway to the ground on that one. How about this? Beautiful vertical thing. These get called in by the general public. Rain shaft. Although there was something developing over there. How about this? It's hard to see the cloud base, but I believe that is a tornado. You've got that tight rotation. See how tight that is? Okay, inflow. Okay, do we have a tornado?
Not yet.
We have a lowering under the rain-free cloud base, but no tornado yet. How about here? Here's your rain-free base. We've got a little wall cloud. All right, keep watching. We got a funnel cloud developing. Is this a tornado?
Not yet.
Not yet. Can you tell? We're looking over a hill.
It's now. Yeah.
You can't really tell if there's debris on the ground or not at this point. There's a little bit. I think if you look close, you can see some.
There's debris on the ground.
And in that situation, if you can't really see what's happening at the ground, you might just say, I have a persistent funnel cloud, I can't see the ground. We'll warn on that anyway, it's close enough. How about this?
Yeah. It's like it's
You can see the cloud halfway to the ground, but there is a nice funnel of debris on the ground of dust
Yeah.
rotating around. lot of times as that develops, then you'll see more in another minute or two. How about this?
See
You
it?
got a funnel with debris again.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the debris on the
How
ground.
about that?
Yeah.
You can see the top and the bottom of the tornado, but not the middle.
Yeah.
But you've got a very well organized tornado there. You can see a little column, well-defined column of rotating air. It's just that the middle of it was invisible. And now the dust is getting lifted up and you can see it better. Tornado?
Not yet.
Got a little wall cloud. It is a little lower toward the rain. And I have a hard time seeing the sense of the rotation of that. There's some motion.
Looks like it's
But I
going
can't really tell.
clockwise.
Kind of looked like it wasn't clockwise. All right, tornado?
It's a
Funnel
funnel
cloud.
cloud at least.
So what we want you to do is say, I've got a funnel cloud halfway to the ground. We'll go ahead and warn on that, but we want you to call us back and say, now it is on the ground going through town.